Hey, welcome everyone to the Brothers Podcast. I'm here with Duncan, and I think we're talking about dreams today. Is that the agenda?
That seems to be the usual direction.
Okay. All right. Um, well, I shared with you a couple of crazy dreams that I had on one night um, last week or so. We've talked just a tiny bit about that. You said you've had some things going on, some dreams. Where would you like to start?
Um, I can share mine, but yours are very interesting, and yours are a lot more to unpack potentially, than I'll start with mine. I'll start. I don't know that mine has all that much.
Mhm.
Uh, I so this is an interesting one. You were involved in this dream, and when was this? This was within the last 2 weeks that I had this dream, and I was going to a retreat, like a men's retreat, and there was a group of us, and we were making our way to where we were going to stay, and where we were staying was this waterfront property, but there was so we were making our way like shoreside on the shoreline, and looking out over the water, there was like big mountainous structure, kind of like cliffside, kind of like southwest kind of feel, like Lake Utah maybe, or I don't know. It was kind of like a southwestern feel, but there were just awesome properties like in the rock faces of this waterside property. And the property we were going to was also waterside, but it was like a tree house almost. It wasn't a tree, it was like this tower that was 8 stories, and around it there wasn't like rooms inside. The only way to get up to and from the bottom, like there was an elevator inside and a staircase so that you could get up to the top floor and the bottom, but there weren't rooms inside. It was like every room, like where we were going to stay was the top floor, and um around it, it was like there were these beams that came around out, that's jutted out from the structure, and then spanning across the beams, almost like wooden poles that jutted out, and then spanning across them were nets, like draped, almost like you see um on a cliffside sometimes, when like they're if you're driving, they put those up so that rocks don't fall onto the road or something. So it was like that, and those went all the way around the structure at every level, so 8 levels. So we had to kind of trudge through the water to get to the elevator door, and we went up to the 8th floor, and that's where we were going to stay and do the retreat. And so the first thing, it was like it was we had got there and I was tired. And so I put my sleeping bag out, and I didn't know what to expect. So I thought I was, I was just ready to pass out for a bit and sleep. So I rolled out my sleeping bag, and um I realized that there wasn't like um a private room or anything. So I just, to gain darkness and like privacy, I guess, had a big I kind of like enclosed my sleeping bag with a brown bag over top. So here comes a brown bag again, which is interesting. So like I put like a brown, basically I was laying down and there's a brown bag that went over my head down to my chest, and then my sleeping bag from there on down. So I was ready to sleep in this, and and before I fell asleep, I realized that my son was with us, and I saw him playing with a ball on the edge of this netting.
Yeah.
And so like, and we had like, I remember throughout the dream kind of meandering over this netting. It wasn't like the safest thing. It was almost like a play gym, or like a, like a play world where just kind of like, but I also, um, I realized we were on the eighth floor. So I was pretty cautious. Like I'm not, I don't say I'm afraid of heights, but heights are not my thing. I do not like being up high like that. I like I went skydiving and I've done that before, but for some reason when I feel like there's just nothing in between someone or me and falling over the edge, that just scares me.
Mhm.
So we're on the eighth floor. I just pulled off this sleeping bag and brown bag, and my son is playing with the ball on the net at the edge. And I see the ball go over the edge, and
Mhm.
he wants to go get it.
Mhm.
And so he goes over the edge to go get it, which is water side. And so he's gonna fall in the water. And so I quick scurry over, and I look where he went, and I dive in, 8-story dive after him. And I open my eyes underneath the water to see where he is. And I see him swimming down deeper
Mhm.
and away from the structure towards this, like it was almost like a hockey ball kind of thing that was sinking, and he was swimming. So, and he currently doesn't know how to swim underneath water like that. I know he'll be able to get there, but he was swimming towards it, and I had enough momentum from my dive that um he looked fine, like he was gonna do it, like, and so, but I was there for one reason, to get him out and make sure he was okay. And so I, with my momentum, grabbed him and kept going, grabbed the ball, and then we went to the surface, and that was the end of my dream,
Mhm.
which which is interesting. And yeah, I guess I'd like to get your initial impressions before I continue on to um, what I thought, unless you'd like me to continue on to. I have initial impressions, and then I it wasn't until last night that something else popped into my head that resonated with greater truth, that
Mhm.
about what it was.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And to close my eyes. If I close my eyes, I can see it all play out.
Yeah,
Uh, it's really interesting. Yeah. Well, um, I don't know what would be most useful to you. It seems like you've already kind of got some sort of idea. I can we can just talk about some of the things that I think about. Um,
yeah, please.
so the the retreat is sort of a moving away from like domestic responsibilities into a new unknown realm that has inherent dangers or uncomfortable aspects to it. There's no, there's not your normal support underneath you. And that's sort of what feels like the netting. It both has like a playful thing and also just some anxiety about like the unknown and not your normal support underneath it. Um,
Totally.
the not having being in a group and not having the privacy, not just not just physical space, but also being open and transparent with a group of people, feeling very uncomfortable and frightening. And not only the sleeping bag is not enough to prevent you from um to give you that boundary, but you have to put this bag over your head so you're totally encapsulated and shielded from being seen when you're sleeping, which is a very vulnerable thing, right?
Hmm.
With strangers moving around and their energy being able to access like the deepest parts of you in your most vulnerable state.
Yeah.
Um, and then in the midst of that, sort of a retreat from your roles as a dad, like now you have uh, a domestic issue of taking care of your child, and that could be some anxiety about going to this place, being vulnerable with these other people. There's some anxiety there, and it feels like there's some anxiety around, like, well, can I do this? And also, like, I've got domestic responsibilities. And then you have like this child that's interrupting this experience that you're trying to have, and uh, needing to take care. And there's an interesting that your son seems playful in this place in a way that you are not.
Yeah.
And um,
Interesting. Hmm.
yeah, in some ways, he's strangely like showing you it feels like he's showing you a way. And then the water representing baptism and like rebirth. And so he's showing you the way towards freedom by chasing after his play and joy. Um, Leads you down a path that you wouldn't have gone. There's no way you would have dove off of an 8-story netting into the water,
Hmm.
um, without him leading the way into that place.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that he is leading you into the depths of something that you would not have explored otherwise. Like he's pushing you to a place that you wouldn't have gone otherwise.
Hmm.
Strangely enough, the retreat can allow you to stay in your own capsule, but your domestic life is where the real baptism is happening.
Hmm.
That seems to be the way that, just as I talk about it, like it feels like I'm given like one little piece at a time, little piece at a time. So that just sort of it unravels. That's kind of where.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Yeah. There we have a quite a few things to hash out here because um the submerged in water being more like a baptism.
Mhm.
That's an interesting concept and not something I had considered right away, but like so typically what I've thought in my past dreams when I've been submerged in water, I've thought it was more of like a um like being immersed in my subconscious or experiencing my subconscious. Here I don't know, and it's interesting because it could almost be baptism and one and the same as that. Those are very similar. So so that's awesome. Um, and then yeah, it's interesting that it was like the nettings were up
Mhm.
like to reinforce safety, right? But I didn't feel I was at the top floor and I didn't feel like it was safe. And it's a brilliant point that I was going to sleep and I was also like thinking about the property, and I forgot to mention this part. I was thinking about the property and acquiring the property, and it was a cool property, waterfront, and I'm not sure I would set it up the same way with the netting or whatever, but I wanted a property like that. Not necessarily like the structure, but just waterfront, and it was like these properties must be expensive because they're waterside. And there was like a tenant almost, or like a manager of the property who we walked past at one point in time, and we interacted with briefly as we were going to find our room, which was the top floor.
Mm.
And when we interacted, he knew right away who we were, and right away where we were going and where we were staying and how long we were staying. And so, and he seemed busy, like he had other stuff to do around the property, but he was very aware of us being there, which is interesting. Um, and yeah, so actually initially I had thought that I was that taking like the sort of subconscious being underneath the water type of
Yeah.
idea, that concept. I had thought that my son was jumping into the water. He's going into his own subconscious, and he's okay. He's going to be okay doing that. Like I'm worried about it maybe. Like this was my initial impression, that I'm worried about it and that he's doing that, and then I'm going in after him, and I don't know if it's the right thing for me to pull him out when I see that he's okay, but I did in this instance because he was pretty deep, and who knew how far the ball was going to keep falling to the bottom, and so I pulled him out. Um, it wasn't until last night that I kind of put it together, because he's actually been having some dreams and waking up in the middle of the night, and we hear him wake up, and he's been having some interesting ones. More, I think most people would call them nightmares, but it's like he had one in the last 2 weeks. He had one where a turkey was chasing him, and he was telling it to stop, and he did not like it. And then he actually had another one where a bear was chasing him,
Mm.
and he was at one of his sitter's house, and a bear was chasing him, and he did not like that. And he speaks out loud in his dream. While he's in his dreams, he speaks out loud. So we know what's going on in his dream, which is pretty fascinating. And then we talk about it the next day. Um, but it wasn't until last night that I I realized that maybe that's what the subconscious is more representative of, is
Mhm.
because I haven't quite known how to
Mm.
talk through his dream with him, especially because they're kind of scary. And so I've been encouraging him to that he could, which is interesting. I haven't been telling him he can just wake up. I've been telling him that he can turn and face it. And so we kind of played. I was the bear and I was chasing him, and he would turn and kind of and like face
Mhm.
it, and then he would want to switch roles and do the opposite.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So we were doing this in real life, just to kind of think about standing up to these things.
Mm.
And it doesn't help that we have a rooster who plucked at him a few times
Yeah.
in the last couple weeks too, that that scared him. But we talked about standing up to the rooster because he's bigger and he's smarter than the rooster.
Mhm.
And bigger, it doesn't necessarily matter,
Yeah.
but it helps. So yeah, I'm not sure if it means that, but there's something interesting there, that the process of him being playful, submerging in the water, chasing after what he's being playful with, and I wonder if there's definitely also something interesting there about the separation between the spiritual side that I was trying to gain by like putting the bag
Mhm.
and being encapsulated in this place, the spiritual side, and then the responsibility side that perhaps I need to work on to bridge more. And then there's also something for me to work on that I think is there, that is going after him and discerning whether it's right for me to let him experience it himself, because he's doing fine and he's swimming just fine, and he's swimming like he's gonna get to what he's swimming for, and he's gonna come back up, as opposed to, do I need to save him here?
Yeah. The theme that I'm hearing in this is about control. Like the whole thing seems about control. Like like you're trying to control situations, manage space, and there is a the environments are all about pushing outside of those boundaries, and there's like some anxiety and all of that letting go of that thing. And that's what I see as baptism, is a surrendering of control, and that your son knows how to do that.
Yeah,
That he's like in some ways showing you the way.
yeah, yeah. It's control. I would say there's definitely an aspect of that. It's, you know, to be a protector, you got to gain control in some way, right? So it's like, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just being a protector. But interestingly, like I'm kind of bridging my protection into the subconscious realm, where I'm, am I really needed there? I can be of help. And yeah, so it's interesting. It has me reflecting on how I help with him doing his dream interpretation and turning in his dreams to fit, because that's the thing. In the you know I've had a lot of dreams where I've been chased, and it's those aren't the good dreams,
Mhm.
or so I thought at one point in time, that. And actually, it wasn't until talking to Susan Morgan that she kind of flipped me and said, actually, those are the best dreams. Those are potentially where we can learn the most. And the goal in those dreams is to turn and face what we're being chased by.
Yeah, yeah. But strangely enough, in this dream, you're the one chasing your son.
Right, right. Off a cliff
Yeah.
into a deep body of water.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm not saying that I wouldn't have done the same thing. I just imagined all the same. Like as a parent, I would have done all those same things. It would have been very odd in the dream if you were just like, "See you later, enjoy the swim." Right? It's just the impact of 8 floors down into water would kill or knock most people out, more or less a child. Um, hmm. It's funny about the 8th floor. Like that's the thing. Initially, I was thinking of the 7 chakras, right? And then there's this 8th one that is outside of that space, right? It's outside of our normal kind of an elevation to another higher realm of some sort.
Interesting. Yeah,
And the higher up you go, Like there's just more inherent danger to that, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
That it's interesting, the idea of holding a retreat in a place that is inherently dangerous like that. I mean, beautiful but dangerous. Like it's got this, and it's one thing to have that netting around it, but it's another thing to be able to sort of walk out on it, like without railing or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I stay back. When we went to Florida this past year, we were on like, I don't know if it was the 12th floor, but I looked over the balcony and it was whoa, and the balcony
Yeah,
for me, it's like just right about waist level.
yeah,
And I've got a long torso, so most of my
yeah,
body is over.
yeah,
And I can hop a fence with so much ease. So it's
yeah.
like, you know, and I want the kids to kind of stay back. I'm like, just stay back. So I think there is an aspect of that is represents my fear in the dreams, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And the almost it's interesting because the nets are almost like I don't know. I don't know if the nets are like a symbol of safety or an illusion of safety that is part of the dream
Mm-hmm.
where like it's interesting my son plays through this illusion of safety and into the subconscious, and I feel I have to go after him and make sure he's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's that netting like that. It's funny. I did a I've done a couple of Spartan races, and the first one I did was really raw. It was before Reebok took it over. It was like really primitive. It was amazing. The second one, Reebok had taken it, and it was already become like sport like. But they had this cargo netting. They had stacked big containers, those big shipping containers. They had, I think it was 3 high. So they built this sort of structure 3 high, and they had cargo netting that went up to the top of that, and then cargo netting that went between them. And there was a big gap, and then cargo netting that went down. And so it created like this sort of archway and then a flat top.
Mm-hmm.
And the gaps in the cargo netting is like this big. It's significant. Like,
Mm-hmm.
be very difficult for your whole body to fall through. Maybe not impossible though, as it sort of stretches and pulls. And there's all these people on it at the same time. And I just remember kind of climbing over that and just like, this feels fucking dangerous. Like you can, it feels like you could
Yeah,
fall through, especially that saggy gap in between those.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's the feeling that I had, even just
yeah,
traversing to our where we were staying around the netting as we went.
yeah. So it feels, it's like both danger and like some small amount of safety. It's like there's something about the idea of a retreat in a space that's designed to have like some safety and all this danger component
Mm-hmm.
combined in it, which, having led retreats for 7 years now, that is a lot of what I try to provide. I try to provide a safe place for people to be very uncomfortable, right? Like safe, like I don't want anybody to have a full-on panic attack or a seizure or like a total psychotic breakdown, but I also want them to be very uncomfortable, uh, in the safest way possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like the structure of this retreat center, the architecture of it is designed in that same way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
And the bag over the head is so interesting because that really is like a doubling down on trying to create your own space, your own safety, your own container,
Mhm.
um, almost sort of blind to your surroundings, blind to the danger of it, just a retreat within the retreat, like you're trying to retreat from that
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. Which when I first remembered the brown bag, it was like, oh, there it is again. If you remember the cart dream where there was the brown bag in the cart, and
Yeah,
so yeah, it's like it's interesting because I don't know if the same sort of thinking applies, but sometimes I think our subconscious or our higher self
mhm,
likes to just toy like this, where
mhm,
it's, we had interpreted that as being the present, like
yeah,
being in the present,
yeah,
which is interesting because it is like I was retreating, but I think you know, it really resonates with me that I like to retreat to my dream space.
yeah,
So like I was trying to go in and get the darkness and retreat to my dream space, which really resonates. So it's interesting that it was represented by a brown bag, which we
mhm,
discussed as being the present
yeah.
and using that.
So, how did you know with this bag over your head that your son was there?
I think had said something, or I heard him, or somebody realized he was playing by the edge or playing with the ball, and somebody said something, and I wasn't quite out yet, and um, yeah, because I wasn't in the bag long until I realized that he was there.
Yeah. I wonder also about, I've heard this a couple of times in my head, just the idea of it being on this, like this dangerous retreat center, beautiful, dangerous retreat center. It's on the side of a cliff. And I just, every time I hear cliff, I think about Cliff High, and there's like all the impeding danger of things, danger and uncertainty, but also excitement about what's getting ready to happen in the world, right? And um,
Yes. Hmm.
for me, there is a sense of um, like trying to prepare and for all of that. And in the midst of trying to prepare for it, then there's all this like domestic stuff, just regular domestic stuff. Like, oh yeah, I got to take this kid to I got to take the 4-year-old to her soccer game, right?
Yeah,
Like, oh, the U.S. dollar is getting ready to collapse, and yes, I'm looking for cleats that are this big. It's just like
that's so funny because we
weird
were doing that.
cognitive dissonance that's happening for me, and I it seems like that is also some layer of all of this too.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, because it's interesting. It was the part of, because as I'm going to these properties, I want property eventually, and I want to find a good deal on property. And so I was thinking, wow, these must be, I wonder what some of these are costing. And, it'd be sweet to get a good deal on one of these.
Mhm.
And so that's part of it. And then I go into the spiritual side, and then, like you said, the domestic responsibility side. And so it's like it is all kind of intertwined there, which is just fascinating.
Yeah. Well, Cliff's name is Cliff High, so it's like there's some part of this too, right? Um,
Yeah, right, right.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, Cliff High. Yeah. And he thinks like there's going to be big changes in that, this banking stuff that is just starting
Yeah.
is just the beginning, and it's going to be worse than 2008.
Yeah.
And um, and if so, it will be a great opportunity if people have their money in the right places to buy property.
Right.
And so yeah, I definitely think there's aspects of that coming in for sure. So
Yeah.
I know you think we sufficiently unpacked that one for now at least. There's
Maybe.
always more later.
Yeah. 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 Well, um, hmm,
Because I know you'll have to go and we have
yeah.
about 20 minutes or so, but or wait, 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Well, I do think that for me, I mean, your kids are still young, right? How old are your children?
He's 2.5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, my cat. Do you hear my cat?
No.
Here, Calvin. He's he's very vocal. Um, so as a father, oftentimes I think that I'm leading my children, but and so there's these weird dual roles of me as the parent, the caretaker, the provider, the protector. And then there's also my children both triggering things in me that need to be healed from my own past and uh, also demonstrating for me my pathway forward.
Mm.
And my oldest is getting ready to turn 19, so I've just been on this path for a long time. I've been I and my youngest is getting ready to turn 4, so I feel like I've had small children. I have had small children in my life for 19 years
Mm-hmm.
almost. And I think it's one of the reasons I've chosen subconsciously. I didn't consciously choose to have this many children, it just worked out that way, that my spirit needed this many children so that I could learn all the things I need to learn. And um, because there's one thing to learn things in meditation, and I have a tendency to want to retreat into the mountains. I've said this so many times, to retreat, go to India and live in a cave, that kind of spiritual awakening. And I had this one of my first experiences with a psychic woman said that was one of the first things she said in a trance state. She's like, you have a deep desire to go into the mountains and retreat. But this lifetime is not about that. This lifetime is you learning the challenges of the domestic component.
Mm.
And it's one thing to know truth, and it's another thing to live truth.
Mm-hmm.
And as uncomfortable as it is to be a father, to be a husband, to be a worker, that um, that's essential for mastery. And so there's something about, I mean, maybe that message, your dreams for me, just a reminder of that. Um, because there's times where I cannot tell you how many times I've been sitting on my bench in a deep meditation in this beautiful place, or channeling and getting this amazing download, or writing what I think is really profound stuff. Then, the kids are screaming downstairs, or my wife calls, hey, can you come down? And I'm like, um, and so there's something about that, like, picture that your dream painted that I resonate with in my
Yeah.
own journey in fatherhood. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Totally. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about like it was just I guess I was just kind of hearing that my son is one of my best teachers.
Yeah.
you know, and it's interesting because I was just talking to a really good friend, Tyler, actually, that about something similar where he had an experience where he was, he was able to go out hiking with his kids. And, usually when you go do that, it's like a good retreat where it's nice and quiet and you can just tap in. But, when there's constant chatter, it's an interesting struggle. And when he explained that, it reminded me of I think you said this to me one time that because I had explained that I wanted to have property and be able to go deep in the woods and privacy and just nice a peaceful wood setting and I think you had mentioned that it's not about where we connect, but it's about how we connect.
Mhm.
And so that's that came up again for me, as he was telling me that story, which is it's tough because there are some, there's it's the deep nature is a great place to connect.
Mhm.
How do we do it when there's a bunch of noise that we perceive to be noise, or there's, nonstop chatter, or,
Mhm.
we have these responsibilities in the meantime.
It's that peace regardless of the circumstances.
Yes.
And that same excuse me, that same psychic lady told me something I've never forgotten. She said that in so many lifetimes I've been a renunciate. I've been the monk. I've been, the guy in the cave. Julianne said the same thing. She was like, you worry about finances and stuff. It's like, you've always been taken care of. Sometimes you've just lived in a cave, like on nothing, right?
Yeah.
And you've been okay. And like, why is it that you're so anxious about this life? And, but that lady said renunciation doesn't equal mastery.
Mhm.
And that has really stuck with me because I know I can get to these higher levels of spirituality if you just leave me alone.
Right.
Like if you just leave me alone and allow me to do my stuff, I know I can get there. I've gotten there before.
Mhm.
And I also carry in me the deep truth from those lifetimes. Now I have to apply that truth in the midst of paying property taxes, which just went up 30%, of like managing, you know, my wife, dealing with my ex-wife, my wife's ex-husband, children that are coming and going. I mean, I really went to like, oh, I'm going to do this domestic thing on the hardest level possible. And sometimes I just want to run away from it. It's just, I want to retreat from it.
Mhm.
That I think, if I could just retreat from this, then I would have that.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, raising children and learning how to really be a good husband in the midst of all the stuff that's going on in the world and also maintain a high level of spirituality, this is the highest level in my opinion of Christ consciousness. It's not being the priest or the single dude that lives in a beautiful cabin in the woods.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's not easy, and it's hard to think of something more challenging.
Yeah, because I'm constantly grounded in this world.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. Um,
yeah, it brings back to me like lately I've been thinking of it as external noise and inner noise.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tame down the inner noise with meditations and if I go into that inner state of peace, but I don't have control over the external noise. And if I can, the best can, the best way for me to manage my perception of the external noise, which in turn allows me to help mitigate the external noise if I need to, if it would help, is to take care of the inner noise as best I can.
Yeah. So I think oftentimes it's hard to be able to take care of that inner noise when the outer noise is really loud in the beginning. But then mastery is being able to be in the midst of total, to be the eye of the hurricane. I channeled this poem like, I am the eye of the hurricane. Chaos all around me, yet I remain the same. And that is that is sort of that is our real inheritance, that is our real destiny, that is what we were designed for. But we have to find that stillness first in a sort of calm place, sort of the kiddie pool, right? And then before we swim in the ocean with waves and insanity around us, and being able to flow and move through that space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. Great metaphor. Yeah.
Hmm. All right, man. We've burned through almost an hour again. Thanks for allowing us to dive deep into your dream. Well, maybe next time we'll talk about mine. I don't know.
Yeah. Definitely.
You cheated me in that we had a little bit of a conversation about it earlier, which was a good one. I'm sorry you guys were not present for it. But I appreciate talking through this. I know I got something out of it. I hope you did too. And I hope whoever listened to this got something as well. So thanks,
Thank you.
brother. Take care.